video is about breaking out of the traditional way of playing, really, and that is for most people, when we're talking scale shapes and your left hand, and that is for most people a huge step. But it really doesn't have to be a huge step. It's just a little bit of a step. And in these little videos here, I'm going to show you that it's actually quite easy to go from the classical way of thinking, the cage shape way of thinking, which is very vertical, to a more free way of thinking when we're talking scale shapes and 3-note per string scales and pentatonics and all that stuff. When I started out, I was told, because I was playing classical guitar when I was 10, I was told to put my first finger in the first fret, my second finger in the second fret, my third finger in the third, and so on. And so I was then told to just, go for the note with the finger that was assigned to that fret. And that was a pretty cool system because it allowed you to move as little as possible. And when it comes to classical music, execution of each note is key. And so we really listen for that when we play a classical piece on the guitar. Stuff like that I played back then. And you listen for, are you executing each note correctly? And when you move as little as possible, you diminish the chance of you hitting, other notes or loose strings or whatever as you play. So that's a really good idea. And then when I started soloing, I started getting into scales. And the first scale shapes I was introduced with was the CAGED scale shape. And that was exactly the same system. It was based on focusing on how to keep your fingers on one fret. If I was playing in a scale shape in the 5th fret, the first position minor pentatonic, it was all, you use your first finger for the 5th fret and then your 4th finger for the 8th fret and then the other two in the middle there, and then you use each finger for its own fret. And the same thing goes if you're playing these CAGED shapes. If you're playing diatonic shapes like the minor or the major scale, then you focus on moving as little as possible. We do not play 2 whole tone intervals on one string, like where you have a fret, an empty fret in between the notes. That's what we avoid completely when we lay out the scales as CAGED shapes. So these are pretty cool shapes as well, but they still focus on economy of movement. But that's not a systematic way, and that's what annoys me most about these CAGED shapes. I use them, don't get me wrong, they're great shapes to learn, but what annoys me about them is that we have 2 notes on one string and 3 notes on another, and if you're playing a sequence like... which is a very systematic, mathematical, logical way of playing notes, follows the same. Then if you're playing that through a CAGED shape, then this is good. But suddenly you have 2 notes on a string, so the whole system of notes gets interrupted by the fact that you suddenly have 2 and not 3 notes on that string. So 3-note per string scale shapes are really cool, as are the CAGED shapes, just depending on what you are focusing on. And then we have these challenges of suddenly moving out, and that's the first challenge really. You have to, instead of hitting the notes right here and then moving back and forth like that, then suddenly you have to reach out of that feeling there. You have to reach out to other notes and stretch a little bit. And it's not the stretching really that's the first problem. The first problem is that you lose your ability to hit the notes while not looking. And just naturally, it feels so unnatural to start reaching for other frets. And so your brain is going to try to work against that. If you've been spending a lot of time with the classical way of thinking and the CAGED shapes, it feels counterintuitive. It feels like it's not supposed to be that way. It feels like it's impossible, like it's some kind of, freakish way of playing that is just a gimmick or a show-off or something like that, where you can do some really rapid stuff. But as soon as you break out of that, as soon as you prove to your body and brain that this is as easy as the other technique of assigning one finger to each fret, as soon as you prove to your body that is actually, it's the same thing. The whole point is that it's just harder because you learned that second and not first. So it's just because you're so used to playing these CAGED shapes and staying in these vertical shapes that the other thing, the 3-note per string thing, and the stretching a little bit and the hitting the notes, 5 or 6 frets away from the first finger, that's the reason why it feels so awkward, is because the other thing doesn't feel awkward. So that's the whole point. But your first challenge is to break out of that, is to prove to the body and the brain that this is just a feeling. It's not real. It's not reality. And the way to do that is to use a simple little exercise that I have devised for you. And it's so simple, but it encapsulates the challenge of moving out of those CAGED shapes. But before I show you this exercise, please keep in mind that it's going to seem awkward, or at least less natural than playing what you're used to. And if you take the cake out of your oven too soon, you will not get a result from which you can conclude anything. So if you practice this a couple of times or for an afternoon and then say, oh, that still doesn't feel natural, then you won't have a result from which you can judge. Okay? So please do this for at least a week and for at least 30 minutes each day in front of the TV. Once you've done that for a week, then you judge. Because that's the oven, that's the week, right? You pull the cake out of the oven, and if you can't feel a measurable, very radical difference, then by all means, act upon it. Then just discard the whole thing and stay with the vertical shapes. What happens when you go from a fingering like this, where you have, I'm in the 12th fret, as you can see, where you have the first finger in the 12th, then you skip a fret and you go for the 14th fret, and then you have the 15th fret up there. The challenge of going from a 1 finger per fret scale shape is to go out here, and then suddenly this 3rd finger, it used to be in relation to the 4th finger just 1 fret away. And that's really, when you've been doing this thousands of times, that really seems very comfortable, and you can almost play the frets without looking, or you can, because you're so used to that feeling of your fingers being in that distance apart. When you start doing this, it's like the brain goes, no, you need to stay here. And so once you start playing like this, your brain's going to try to counteract or work against you playing like this. And that's the worst challenge, really, or the biggest challenge of stretching, is not the stretch of doing this. It's that your brain is working against it and trying to tell you that it's impossible or you can't do it. But just the simple exercise here is really going to fix that, because it shifts between the old fingering and the new fingering. So here we go, brain. This is what we know, and this is the new thing. And once we have built a bridge from the existing to the new, it's going to be like, okay, the brain can, I can shift now. Okay, so this is old, this is new, this is old, new. So this thing becomes a thing instead of a, let me see, first finger, let me get my 3rd finger all the way up there, and then my 4th, that seems weird. But as you do this exercise, which is basically just shifting between these 2 fingers, it's the easiest and the simplest of exercises, or not easiest, but once you do that, thousands of times, it's really going to be a whole new world. It's the key to opening up the world. And for me, this is as easy and natural as this. There isn't a difference at all in the brain. And when you get to that point, when you sit, for a week in front of the TV, it's going to be really easy. So how do we do this? Well, to make this an exercise that you can actually use when you play, I pick the first 3 notes. So I go 12, 14, 15, and then I pull off the next, right? And then I only pick, because I'm down here, I hit the 15th fret with my 3rd finger, and then my 17th fret with my 4th finger, and pull off. Right? So first, the first time around is different. So I go, that's the first, right? First little. So pick, pull off, right? The second time around, I go, so I pick this with an upstroke in the 15th fret, then with a downstroke in the 17th, and then I pull off down again. Both notes, right? Then I do the same thing. Now this is the 3rd time around, so I go, since I already played this note, I go, so I hit the 14th fret with an upstroke, and then the 15th fret, and then I pull off. So slowly, And please notice that the first time is different from everything else. You just set it off, you start it off. So. And I'm just continuing, I'm just repeating, right? And with a little even rhythm here, because it's not play like that, I'm just showing you in little pieces. So I go. That's the way to do it. You might want to use a metronome. Yeah, in the beginning, and then take it to the TV. Just sit down and play it, 1,000 times. Casual Tuesday night. And then it's actually a little cool lick that you can do once you get it up to speed, right? And you're already utilizing the cool advantage of being able to go further. Please play it in the 12th fret so you have that, a little distance in between the notes, because if you go down, then you have more distance in between the notes, and the stretching will be a little bit harder. But if you can do this, then gradually you can move down 1 fret at a time and practice, and you won't simply notice when you go to the 5th fret and you play the same thing. It'll be really easy. So this is not focusing on learning a new lick. This is a focus on breaking free. So we're establishing proof in the brain here, right? That this is as easy as, because it surely doesn't feel like that once you start practicing it. But you need to get to the point where this is as easy as the old routine here. And then every pathway is pretty much open from there.